Hey Watchman, I'm commenting on your video. Did Jesus think it was okay to rob God? You responding to somebody, or somebody asked you if you can comment on Philippians chapter 2 verses 6. You're going to do this using the NIV, but you claim that the King James was not an accurate translation. So I'm going to listen to the intro. I think the emphasis of your video is to see if Jesus was God. That's the whole deal. So I'm going to play the beginning of your video real quick.
Hello everyone. This video is a response to an email request that I received asking that I make some comment on Philippians, the second chapter, verse 6 specifically. The emailer said he didn't believe in the Trinity, but he did have discussions with Trinitarians, and they seem to think that Philippians 2:6 was a key text that proves that Jesus is God.
Okay, notice Philippians 2:6 is a key text to show Jesus is God. I'm going to let you speak for a minute until I use my NIV to rebut your explanation.
Actually, that's only the case when a person is using the old King James Bible. I remember.
Okay, you said that's only the case when somebody's using King James Bible. We're going to see in a moment. Actually, you're going to read it off the NIV and see how it translates in your mind and what the text says. I'm going to compare it real quick.
Where I had a situation, and when I first started going out in the field service, I knocked on the door, and it happened to be one of my grade school teachers pulled this on me, Philippians 2:6 from the old King James. I wasn't really all familiar with it, but consider it robbery that he should be equal to God. So it seems to be saying that Jesus thought that he should be equal to God.
Okay.
It's really hard to get your mind around. It makes no sense, really.
You are disagreeing on King James saying equal to God. And I'm going to prove it to you in a moment, that their nature is equal, the Father and the Son.
If you think that Jesus is God and he's having a struggle with himself, that trying to be superior to what is one part of the Trinity, having a knockout with the other part, how does that work? But that's the King James, and I will say that even more modern translations, which do have a Jesus is God bias, they do not translate Philippians 2:6 that way.
Okay.
Let's face it, King James. I mean,
okay.
Let me read that verse to you
from the NIV.
From the NIV.
Okay.
More recent translation. I'll start at verse 5, where Paul wrote, "Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ."
Okay, your attitude. I want you to hear yourself when you read the scripture, sir.
It's Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. But he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant and being made in human likeness.
Okay. Your video would have been more convincing if you would have just stuck to verses 6. Maybe you could have confused us. But you brought in verses 5, because verses 5 is kind of the headline of the whole beef of that poetry by Paul. It says your attitude should be the same as, okay, so the topic is attitude. But Paul, for a moment, in verses 6, comes in to introduce us the nature of Christ, and then goes back into the attitude mode halfway through verses 6. Notice? Your attitude should be the same as that of Jesus Christ, who being in very nature, so for a moment he explains to you in one sentence the nature of Christ, to just show you where Christ used to be. Did not consider equality with God. Okay? He's showing you the nature, his nature is the supreme, but yet how Christ, his attitude, remember the title in verses 5 was attitude. That's what he's explaining. So halfway through on the second line of verses 6, Paul goes on to explain attitude right away, after he describes the nature of Jesus in one sentence, because that was not disputed. Now, I'm going to go back to verses 6, the first line. Paul says, who being in very nature God. Being in very nature God. Remember in King James you had a problem because it said equal to God. Equal to God. The equality is the problem you had. And Paul here in NIV, the translators of NIV, put it as nature. Okay, instead of equal with God. I have a question for you. Let's leave the scripture out of it. By the way, here's the NIV. Okay? You are a grown man. And there's a newborn baby. Okay? A newborn baby. Who is more of a human? You as a grown man? Or the new infant? Who's more of a human being? In nature. Remember Paul said here? Who being in a very nature. You're both equal. You as a old man, the new infant as a brand new baby, in human natureness, if there's a word, you're equal. I got an example for you. See these two? These are water with a little bit of dye in it, so you can see it on camera. You see that? This one is full. This one is less. But in nature, they're the same. Mr. E. Watchman, can I ask you a question? Which one is more of water in nature? Which one is more water in nature? This one? Or that one? You see? They're equal. In nature, they're equal. You understand? This one is as much water it is as this one is water. You understand? Now, if I was holding two different fluids up here, then we have two different entities. See, in your head, you're thinking of the magnitude of the Son and the magnitude of the Father, and you're applying it to their nature. That's where your confusion is happening. See, in their nature, they're God. According to Christianity, there's one nature in our God. And if those traits are the same with Jesus Christ, which Paul says it in verses 6, who is being in every nature God, the Christian God, which we know all his traits, and God the Father has the Christian traits, we know all those traits, they're equal in nature. Notice? They're equal in nature. But you see, you consider it as a human glance comes into your mind, or kind of human government comes into your mind. You understand? To where you think it's all tyranny. Since the Father is larger than the Son, then the Son must be lesser God in nature. Then we've got a different God in heaven. So we've got two different natures of God. And then we enter into paganism. We're not Christians, so we might as well just hold hands with Hindu and run around. You see where the confusion happens in your mind? In their nature, they're the same. And if in heaven, if they're both their natures the same, they're equal. And there's no hierarchy, power struggle in heaven. It's perfect. Everything is harmonious to beyond what your mind can even conceive. I look forward to your response on this one. Thanks.